Hello. So today I am lucky enough to have Martin McDonald join me on the podcast, who is a leader in nutritional education and founder of Mac Nutrition. He's worked with some incredible athletes and celebrities in the past and is a huge social media presence. He always manages to make learning about nutrition fun and entertaining, which I think is something we all need. And he is, in general, just a really decent bloke, which also helps. So I'm excited to have Martin join me on the podcast today. How are you, Martin?
After that introduction, very well. Thank you, Kate.
I love a cheesy
Thanks for having me.
introduction. You're most welcome.
Honestly, I always enjoy, or I get excited about how the start of a podcast is going to go. And when I listen to kind of the intros of podcasts I'm going to go on, and it's really nice when people kind of make, not to say all that stuff, but just go give a little intro and give some idea. But a decent bloke, that's not a normal one that's said, so that's just nice. It's like, just add that in. He's just a general decent bloke. So thank you very much.
No, you're most welcome. It was that all leading a thought leader, which I thought was quite cool as well. But then I won't reduce it.
Thought leader is one of my I remember when someone first called me and I was like, oh geez, you sort of, it's like I've officially made it. Someone's called me a thought leader. That's cool. But yeah.
Absolutely. So how are your energy levels today? I know you're doing an aggressive diet right now. So how is it going?
I'm actually in a middle phase where, and to be honest, even when I'm aggressive dieting, my energy levels don't go down. But I'm in a maintenance period since I actually got back from a quick breakaway. So absolutely buzzing, to be honest.
Good.
Lots of food, lots of fuel.
Food. Yeah. Good. And on your last podcast, you mentioned something really interesting that I think it would be great for you to elaborate on. And that's when you said you just need a bit of tough love sometimes with yourself. And I'm a big, strong proponent for having a bit of tough love, but also having a bit of self-compassion as well. How do you find the happy medium?
Yeah, I'm not great at dealing out tough love. But I think which maybe is the way it should be. I don't know. It should come very naturally. I think some people almost see it as a goal to provide tough love for people. And I don't think it's necessarily, there's a fine line between tough love and then just shaming someone. And we know that a lot of evidence-based techniques with regards to, even with friends, I'm kind of talking about here, but if we talk about clients, like obviously you work with people, there's this old school personal trainer idea of being a bit of a drill sergeant and why have you done that? You're going to get punished for doing X, Y, Z. And it's cool that we're in a time of the industry where people like you and others are highlighting a bit more of a compassionate mindset. And because really we know that's what works. And so a technique called motivational interviewing that some people may have come across, there's this idea that we have this righting reflex. So someone does something that we think is not helping them or isn't ideal, and we tell them how they should change. And so that's our reflex to tell them the right answer. And often saying it's a bit like parents telling a child to do something. Often it will lead to them doing literally the opposite. And so tough love can cause people to defend what's called the status quo. So rather than flipping things on its head and sort of going, I don't know if this is a bit heavy for this podcast, but I literally read a page and actually, I recorded this podcast for myself and it was supposed to be inspirational. And I find it a bit funny when I talk about being inspiring because I'm just me. But it's really nice when people say, oh, you've inspired me in this way and that way. And I felt inspired by this book. But the problem is, so it's called Man's Search for Meaning. I'm not sure if you've heard of it.
Victor.
Right. Frank.
Yes. Yeah. Amazing book.
Yeah. So I don't read books. I have not read a book since To Kill a Mockingbird when I was about 15. And I buy books, like obviously your listeners can't see this, but I have a bookshelf behind me where I buy good and bad books for kind of reference and even just to support the work of people. But this one's so little, and I love the quotes that I see online from that book. And so I just read the preface, and it's phenomenal, and it literally sucked me in. And it's actually in the preface where some professor of psychiatry at Harvard or something is doing the preface for, obviously, Viktor Frankl, who's a psychiatrist, psychologist, and has this version of logotherapy, which is I'm not big on this stuff, but existential analysis, I think, is a current modern day evidence-based technique, and he's almost a bit of a founder of lots of the principles.
Yeah.
But anyway, what's really this is really deep, so apologies to your listeners.
No, I think it's great.
Yeah, okay, cool. So in the start of this book, this Harvard professor basically says one of the questions that Viktor Frankl would use in his work with people with lots of psychiatric disorders and depression and mental health issues. And he would often ask them, why haven't you committed suicide yet? And it's a very, very deep question. But the reason I'm giving that extreme example, I didn't mean it to be extreme, it's just the first one that came to mind. But asking someone, well, why haven't you given up trying to improve your health? Well, why haven't you, and flipping it, rather than, why do you keep self-sabotaging? Why do you keep not going to the gym? Why do you keep, because that will cause this defense of the status quo. And whereas when you ask someone the opposite end of the spectrum, what you then get them to do is to think of the reasons, lots of their whys. And so, why do you keep coming back to this? Well, I want to be healthy for my children. I want to be around for them. I want to be able to play with them. For me, I even do a bit of extra stretching and just, keep going back to a bit of cardio, which I hate, because I want to be able to play football with Arlo, my son, when he's a bit older. And so he asked them this, probably one of the deepest, most extreme questions maybe that you could ask someone. And what it does is it then creates their whys for life. And it gives you this insight into them of, is there a relationship that's really strong for them? Is there, like a wife or a partner? Are there children in the equation? Are there some? And they talk about like these distant memories that they're still clinging to, that a part of their happiness. And then you can dial into that as their why and reasons for doing stuff. So, in a roundabout way, and I think lots of the stuff that we can talk about with regards to this COVID situation and lockdown is lots of self-acceptance and lots of your why and the acceptance of the situation that we're in, and not trying to go for perfect. So striking the happy medium is, sometimes people do need a little bit of just hearing something. And that's why I love these podcasts, doing my own, appearing on as a guest, because you can often say stuff in a broad manner, not directed at any one individual. And then that person can choose to hear it for themselves or just disregard it. But there's not as much shame. There's not as much guilt that maybe is caused by some of these things. When I've talked about nutrition for children, often as a parent, you can feel quite guilty or shameful that you did something that maybe would lead to your children having, you didn't know any better than to weigh your child at this point and maybe talk about that weight in front of them. Like, for some people, it's like, oh, you definitely shouldn't do that. How dare you? And it's like, well, some people just maybe don't realize the effect that could have on a child. But when you talk about it globally like this, people can choose to kind of accept maybe some of the tough love. And on one of my recent podcasts, I just went off on one, just basically having a go at my loyal followers. But it was falling on, I was almost preaching to the converted. I needed other people to hear that, and basically saying, stop following Z-list celebrities. Stop wasting your time on Instagram. Stop wasting you're just feeding your mind rubbish. And I know maybe my stories and my content isn't particularly entertaining. I mean, you kindly said that I, try and make it entertaining, and I do. But there's only so much you can do when you're talking about science or, some of the heavier stuff. But at the same time, I basically said, you idiots keep asking me these questions in my question box. You want one answer that's going to solve all of your problems, and it's not going to come. So stop doing that. Follow me for 2 years, consume all of my content, listen to all my podcasts, and I will gradually take you on this nutrition journey to change your mindset, which I know like you love the mindset stuff, and give you tools that you can become more robust for a situation like a pandemic. How's it going to affect us? Well, we don't know. So you need lots of different tools that you can draw on, that you can maybe make the best of any situation that you're put in. Anyway, there's my super long answer to your questions.
No, it had a lot of nuance, which I think is the amazing thing about a podcast, that you can add all these different parts without, instead of being on an Instagram post and saying one tiny quote, without very much nuance. But from a podcast, people can listen and take different parts, and some bits will resonate more, some bits less, and some people will perhaps really enjoy what you said about, just take action, just go for it, and stop listening to the other BS. Exactly. But from that as well, it's clear that it's coming from a place of genuinely wanting to help people. So you clearly have a lot of empathy and wanting to help people a lot. Is this perhaps the purpose for you creating your upcoming layperson's MNU course, or is it something else? What's your why for that?
Yeah, it's funny actually. I guess if asked a very open question like, why are you doing the course? I wouldn't say empathy. It wouldn't be the first thing that comes to my mind. But you're so right in that I have to stop myself having ideas, which some people would see as business ideas. And I don't view myself as super entrepreneurial, although, people kind of view me that way. And I don't view myself as some expert, amazing businessman, although lots of people view me that way. But my business ideas, as they might be seen outside, come from empathy of, I love social media and like the good sides of it. And I love being able to interact with people when I can't be in person. I mean, that's my passion, in person speaking. And one reason I actually stopped working with one-to-one clients was being too empathetic and not protecting my own mental health in that thing of just almost caring too much, taking way too much weight on myself. I didn't set appropriate boundaries in terms of whose responsibility things were. This is me, young 20s, and qualified degrees and masters, etc. But I wasn't. This is with MNU, our professionals courses. This is the stuff I want to prepare people for, to understand where the balance of responsibility for results are and how you set that up with clients. But me, I didn't have any of that mentoring. This stuff didn't exist, and I don't know if it really exists much elsewhere in the whole of the industry unless you find these little pockets of information. But yes, so my empathy drove me to a point of just I couldn't handle it. And but yeah, so now interacting with people. So yeah, I love the public speaking. That's why I love interacting with people, meeting people in person, and that's why I love expos, just walking around and just getting into these nice conversations with people. But through so many DMs on social media and questions on posts, I start to get these ideas of people need to be served in this way. And instantly I go, I have the ability to do that. I have the team to do that. I have the resources to do that. I have the knowledge to do that. Let's do this business idea. It's nothing to do with the business. It's like, these people need help and we're not helping them. And then, but literally now for the last 2 years, Sarah, the head of nutrition here, she's like, stop having ideas. Just stop it. We're too busy. We can't do another thing. And I think this course is, this course has been like in the backs of our mind and in the planning stages for about 2 years, due to be released in 2021. And the purpose of that is because we have supported professionals so much, how can we bring life-giving, empowering knowledge to a super broad spectrum of individuals? The actual original name for it, so it's going to be called the MN School of Nutrition. But the original name for it was the Family Nutrition Course, because that's where we kind of really wanted to help people in this family, feed yourself and feed your family for healthy living, etc. But it's just kind of changed. We didn't want to you don't have to be in a family to benefit from it, essentially.
Yeah.
And even though I actually saw something from some kind of activist-esque person that saying, I purposely call me and my boyfriend a family because we want to fight against this idea that you have to have children to be a family. And I'm like, yeah, cool. It's like some different people have things. I fully agree with that. But you can be a single individual and benefit from this course. So I just think the information in there, it's so extensive. Like we're currently, on the going through all of the things, refining and all that kind of stuff. And I'm like, geez, this course is amazing. I can't wait to see the impact it has. Like my podcast, even, I never knew, I just like, I'm going to do a podcast. I just like talking. I'm not getting to do my public speaking. I really miss getting stuff out of my brain and to help others. And already it's only been going 2 months, and it's like, I'm getting these testimonials. I literally cannot believe what people take away from stuff. Like I really respect them for listening and implementing and having those open ears. And but yeah, so I think, yes, you are right. There's a level of empathy on it. And also, it's just something that doesn't really exist. Like there isn't a course like this, a place people can really educate themselves on the stuff that matters to help them with. We've got, basically how it's going to be set up is this fundamentals. The fundamentals course. I think that's what it's called. Fundamentals or foundation? Yeah, fundamentals course, and it's huge. It's got all the fundamentals of nutrition, and then what we're doing is, if people are interested in health or muscle gain or fat loss or sport and exercise, they can basically go down these different paths. Everyone needs to know these fundamentals, and that's why that bit's huge. And then they can then do the different, or they can do all of them. If they're just like a geeking out, they can do all of them.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's an overview.
So if I'm right in hearing, it may well be, I've got a few clients who might be more interested in learning nutrition to a higher level. So would it be particularly helpful for people like that who are like, I'm actually really interested in this, I want to learn more, which perhaps goes beyond the capabilities of what my service of coaching perhaps can offer, and then like, I want to really get into a course on that? Would that be the particular person do you think this could help?
Yeah, so we're actually this course, because some people are like, we were kind of surprised with how many career changers were interested in MNU, but were coming from a background with no science background with, and it was just a bit too much of a jump. So in that instance, we've actually written MN School of Nutrition as almost like a stepping stone to then do MNU afterwards. Yeah. And it's interesting you talk about like kind of clients. I feel like if a personal trainer has a client doing the course, they can essentially mentor them through the course, like if they have the knowledge, and almost conceptualize some of what they're learning. Like we're teaching it in a super practical manner, but having that conversation, because it's not a course like MNU which has tutor support and literally you're in a cohort. This is a self-study course. Having a personal trainer go through it with you, because someone actually said to me, oh, do you think people are just not going to need personal trainers and nutritionists anymore? And I was like, definitely not. Because nutrition, back in the day, the 20-year-old Martin McDonald was all about numbers, physiology, science. I made jokes about psychology. I made jokes about meditation. Like all my psychology peers at university, I was like, oh, psychology, you mean unproven physiology? And, just like, oh, you just like writing about your opinion, I don't think many psychology degrees are that good. But when you learn about real world psychology, real world behavior change, it's a game changer. And my whole practice, unfortunately, had to change when I woke up and realized, damn it, and this is why I'm so passionate about talking about macros. Like macros are literally pointless to view as some kind of magical tool for optimizing someone's nutrition. Like everyone in the industry, when I started and was in my career, was like, what's the optimal macro split? And it's still going on. Macros by your body type. Like, oh, it blows my mind. So from this perspective, it's like, yeah, the psychology of it is huge, and we know evidence-based, like almost unequivocal, what means someone that can start a life-changing thing, whatever the goal may be, health or fat loss, fitness, etc. Accountability and even social support, so maybe being part of a group in some way, one way or another. But this is why people need personal trainers and nutritionists. It's one, they're not going to necessarily be able to have expert knowledge. They do this course, but there's a lot to be said for coaching experience, right? Like as you coach more clients, you become more knowledgeable and more understanding of, oh, this is maybe how I should adapt this approach for this client. You've got years of experience that this person has just got essentially textbook experience. Now, what we teach is a million times, I think, better than any textbook experience before, having done, several degrees, several vocational qualifications, lectured myself on at different academic institutions. We teach in a very different way. But even then, people need a partner, a buddy, a coach, someone to be accountable to, someone to listen to them and understand the situation, and also act as a sounding board. So definitely not, I don't think it's going to stop people needing them. But some people who maybe can't afford to see a personal trainer 4 times a week or whatever, or pay for online coaching for a year, for instance. That's another thing for me, actually, Billy, when we were talking about price points and how it would work and this kind of stuff, this kind of says a lot about Billy, but he's like, we need to make it as cheap as possible so as many people can do it as possible. It's such helpful information. And like, I love that I have staff that say stuff like that. It's cool. So yeah.
I think that's exciting because it's making it accessible for people, and that is incredibly important, and it's what people need right now. And I know we mentioned we were going to talk more about the lockdown today and how that has affected people's nutrition right now. And now more than ever, people are going to need a resource like that. Now, I know people have a lot of things going on right now listening, and I understand people might have a myriad of different situations that are creating quite a stressful time. And how would you recommend people like that find a bit of clarity and optimism when things are incredibly stressful?
It's interesting the way you've worded that. It's like, oh, you haven't even really mentioned nutrition, which is quite cool. Like, I don't know if people are sort of, my podcast is called Not Another Nutrition Podcast, and I love the name because it really, one is that whole thing of like, my podcast is going to be different from other people's or better than other people's, whatever. But the main reason is this: it isn't just about nutrition. And in fact, what's really annoyingly something that I love talking about at the minute is life and happiness and ways to live your best life. And I suppose maybe through different struggles I've had and come out the other side, it's this religious epiphany that people have. So when someone does keto, right, and they're like, oh my goodness, I lost weight, they want to tell everyone that keto is the best diet in the world, and actually it's coming from a good place often. It is a religious epiphany of, I failed at everything and then this worked, and they don't understand the principles of energy balance and this, that, and the other. And so for me, various different things of having had my own struggles and then just finding so much happiness in different things, and finding myself so capable of dealing with massively stressful situations. I want to talk about that with people, and it gets me excited. So like reading that Man's Search for Meaning book, I didn't read that from a place of being lost. I, was on top of the world and was like, I mean, I don't read books, but it was just like, I read in that preface, I read stuff that basically was confirmation bias. It just said everything that I thought. And even that, when I read Viktor Frankl's quotes, lots of them were just the way I like to live my life. So I was like, it is that thing of, I want someone to tell me I'm right. But because he's such a brilliant man, like he's a concentration camp survivor. Again, I didn't really say that at the beginning of when we were chatting before, and he's also hugely intelligent and hugely academically qualified to talk about some of this stuff. So, when you said about how can people cope and, these times of stress, it's, nutrition is, the reason I love nutrition is because it's everyone's interested in it in one way or another, or at least has an opinion or is affected by it. Like we all eat. And, when I'm a fairly boring individual other than nutrition. And so if you go to a dinner party or a wedding or something, you're on a table, everyone's talking about politics. I have literally nothing to add. I'll just sit here in silence. And then they're talking about public affairs or international business. I'm like, no, I have nothing. As soon as the conversation inevitably turns to nutrition or anything around that, I suddenly am the most interesting person on the table.
Yeah.
So,
understandably.
and often it's like, oh, what do you do? What do you do? Oh, nutrition. And then literally the rest of the day, that's all anyone talks about. And because I love it, people say to me, don't you get bored of it? And I'm like, no, I literally love it. It's my favorite thing. So on to your question about dealing with this stressful situation, two sides of it. I talk loads on my podcast about this, just the word acceptance. So I did a video in the first lockdown about that kind of got lots of traction on Instagram about why weight regain isn't a failure. And actually, the video was actually from a conference that I delivered 2 years ago. It was a snippet from that, but I posted it in the start of lockdown because I've already been talking about this and how we build habits. When I said earlier about giving people tools that they can draw from in different situations they find them in, sometimes you are faced with a situation that you've never dealt with before, or you can't be really prepared for. So my second part to this answer about dealing with stress is stuff like Stoic philosophy. Like it's just kind of this thing that I'm hugely into. And I was even saying to one of my staff, I kind of wish they taught this stuff in schools.
Agreed.
Just telling people, yeah, good, that's cool. And stuff about gratitude, like gratitude for me is just this, it's almost a bit of a dirty word in that there's this, it's a bit hippy dippy in some ways. And some people just, they're kind of false positivity or just empty. I think it's just sometimes, oh, just be grateful for this, or just, oh yeah, hashtag gratitude. It's like I'm on a beach, hashtag gratitude about the sunset. And they're actually just someone who's really unhappy with their life and just trying to fake it on Instagram. But gratitude is an evidence-based process. It's not hippy dippy. It's really grounded in some excellent data that practicing gratitude can really change your mental state, your mental health, and can help you deal with some crappy situations. So I think even actually I spoke about this recently. Oh, you've just made me remember something. I'm just going to make a little note.
Go for it.
So I put this thing on Instagram and I actually annotated. I was working out and someone asked me a question and I annotated the thing. Oh, goodness, this really set my mind on fire, this. And basically I said, one of the comments I made, it was just all off the top of my head. I can actually remember where I was sat in Pure Gym in Loughborough and basically said, you are privileged to even consider the idea of dieting. And that might sound a bit crazy to some people, like, oh, well, people talk about thin privilege and this, that, and the other. And it's like, yeah, that's another kind. But even having the ability to pay for food, even to consider your macro split, even to consider, I'm going to elevate my protein, arguably the most expensive macronutrient. I'm going to elevate my protein because that might help me with different, appetite regulation or building muscle mass if I want to, or, all these different positive things. That is a privilege. It's a privilege to be able to pick nice tasting foods that you can diet on if that's your thing. But people go into diets, and I keep saying to this, unless you're excited about the idea of dieting, just don't flipping do it. Like, unless it fills you with energy, do not do it. And I think for some people, if they sat back and listened to those words over and over again, it would be an aha moment for them. You're never going to hate yourself into change. You're never going to guilt yourself into change. It should be like the last time you took up a new hobby, or the last time you went, oh, I'm going to run the London Marathon. I've never done that. Those people are crazy. I've never had that thought. Let me run and get nipple chafage and blisters and pain and run in the cold. But some people go, this is a cool endeavor, or I'm going to do the 5 peaks, or just all these mad things that I can't understand. But for me, what people need to see dieting as is, I have this privilege to, you need to get to a place where you don't hate yourself in this situation. You shouldn't try and change your body for extra happiness. You shouldn't try to, it shouldn't come from a negative headspace. So it needs to be this thing of, I'm privileged to be able to, I like how I am now, but I want to be like this. You don't have to dislike who you are now to want to change or improve or change something. And so I've gone off a bit, but
you've actually answered my next question beautifully.
Oh, cool.
So it's fine. Yeah, just keep it going.
I'm glad about that. I'll go back to what I was actually supposed to be talking about, which is this coping with these stressful situations. But it is a lot of that. So the gratitude stuff, the acceptance stuff, the understanding that you can be put in situations that you've never dealt with before. Which is obviously an unprecedented global pandemic. And when you have that acceptance of, do you know what, I'm not going to feel guilty. Like I just put on my story before we came on the call, like, how has the pandemic affected your eating? And people going, I'm doing this. I'm cooking more nutritious meals, but I'm snacking more and I feel guilty. And I'm like, why? Why do you feel guilty? Oh, I do this and I hate myself for it. Why? Like that, you need to stop everything else and dial into that and stop that. Start looking at methods for, self-acceptance, even just getting guilt and shame away from food. Like, it's ridiculous. I had a biscuit, so I am a worse person. Like, in your rational brain, you probably know that's not true, but our irrational, emotional brains and life experience and upbringing and etc., relationships, they all feed into these. But this, annoyingly, it's so much harder to change someone's psychology than their macros. Like, I just change something in a spreadsheet and I tell them to eat this food and it changes. But to change someone's psychology, it takes so much personal work from people. And so how can you cope with this situation? It's acceptance. Weight regain in any situation, grief, breaking up from a relationship, a change in job, being not married and then being married, all of these things change our behaviors, change our focuses, change our levels of resources, time and money, etc. And we are not, or there'll always be a lag time to get into new habits. And the best thing people can do is just accept that, rather than hating themselves and going, oh, I failed. Oh, I broke my leg and put on some body fat. I'm such a failure. Like, why on earth does someone think that? Like, it's so dumb. And that's not an insult to anyone. We are dumb. We are such stupid beings. Like, obviously you have some compassion for yourself. You broke your leg. You have been completely inactive. So yeah, this whole thing of acceptance. And what that does is it gets you to a place quicker where you can start looking at positive changes. Mm-hmm. You know what? I'm super stressed by the pandemic. I might lose my job. I might this. I don't like working from home. I'm super lonely. I'm closer to the fridge than I usually am. And I'm just, and also one thing to say is the appetite. There's a stress response to appetite. Mm-hmm. A really cool study that I talk about on my tour is they took females, which I tend to make the joke, which all the cool females like, and all the ones who have hate men get uppity about. I'm not a flipping women hater, just it's a joke. They take females.
It's because there's not enough nuance on social media. It is because they take one small thing.
Yeah, exactly. And So they got a group of females, and I call it the chocolate cake study, right? Because they split this, randomly divided it into two groups, and they basically, on one occasion, stressed these women the hell out, and then they locked them in a room with chocolate cake. And I'm like, that is such a real world study. You know, people go, oh, it's on lab rats and science labs. I'm like, no, it isn't. They literally took women and they locked them in a room with chocolate cake. It's like, that is our lives. We are in lockdown, locked inside with chocolate, and we're friggin' stressed. And they then let them eat and it wasn't just chocolate cake, sorry, it was a buffet of highly palatable foods, and there was chocolate cake there. And they then did a second trial with these same women and didn't stress them. And they ate significantly more chocolate cake in the stress situation. So it's like, even that, just knowing that this is a physiological response. And they also then found differences in the hypothalamus pituitary axis between individuals, which, again, it comes back to that genetics thing. Everyone's probably heard of or knows someone who maybe was going to get married, a bride, who lost weight due to the stress of organizing the wedding. Everyone hates her. But it's like, oh, well, you just had to take your dress taken in. Oh, well, lucky you. Everyone else, desperately, So, but this is the case, that we are very different as individuals. And stress affects us differently, and sleep affects us differently, and these kind of things. So having some acceptance of you and the cards that you've been dealt, I talk about this a lot, like if you just accept your cards, whether you've got PCOS or hypothyroidism or whatever, just accept that those are your cards. Because people go, it's unfair. Oh, it's harder for me than anyone else, and they give up. What they need to do is go, this is my hand of cards. I can't change those. I'm going to play these cards as best I can. And it's like the nature, nurture, like genetics versus environment discussion. And so once you accept that, yeah, you're in a global pandemic, you're stressed. How can you cope with this situation? Well, for a start, give yourself a friggin' break. It is stressful, this chronic stress. Honestly, I deal with thousands and thousands of people every month through social media, emails, my students, the professionals I mentor. And I can categorically say that I've seen the worst of humankind, I think, in this time, in terms of a lot of us at different points during this 2020 and in the start of 2021 have been the worst versions of ourselves. People are they're stressed and they're snappy and they're arguing more and bickering. And I refunded everyone. So I think the refunds for my tour, which all got cancelled in 2020, I know lots of different events companies treated things differently. I just said everyone's getting 100% of their money back, even though it's like a non-refundable ticket and this, that, and the other. And I might lose money through the venues. I said, I'm refunding everyone, no questions asked, which I thought was a nice thing to do. I was refunding like £80,000 worth of money, just like, there you go, that's my 2020 screwed. But I don't want anyone to be affected by this, and I'm not going to deliver what I said I would. And I don't think it's a great thing to do. I think it's basically a fairly the least I could do. But basic, I know the difference is basic. Yeah. But people are like, oh, so amazing, I can't believe you did that, because they're dealing with Ryanair and all these other companies, these massive festival companies who are going, no, you're not having your money back. You have to come to a different date next year. It's like, well, I planned for this year. I'd like my money back and I'll choose whether I come the following year. But even on that, I refunded everyone all this money, and I had people going, I said, it'll be with you within the next 30 days. Like, this is at the start of the global pandemic where I'm having to move all of my staff remote and dealing with everything, this, that, and the other. People emailing me, I was like, 30 days. Someone emailed me after about 18 days. Hi, Martin, just wondering when this is going to be in my account. You said 30 days, it's been 18. I'm just wondering, is it going to be the full 30 days?
I can't believe that.
I said up to 30 days. I'm like, I have thousands of people to deal with, and you're bothering me. I told you when you'd have it back. And just people like being so arsy about different things. Like the week before, I sent out these emails to thousands of people, and people were going, well, this can't be going ahead. Things are so bad here. I don't know how they are for you, but obviously this event won't be going ahead. So will I get a refund? Just like really rude. I'm like, it's like they're talking to a computer rather than a human. I'm like, you're talking to me. You're coming to my talk.
Yeah.
But I just across the internet, I'm trying to act with as much compassion as possible, but I know I've been the worst version of myself at times as well. But it has affected us, and even if you don't see it, life not being normal, weird things going on, getting annoyed that someone is or isn't wearing a face mask, and trying not to judge people, and you don't know what their situation is, but kind of being a bit annoyed because they cough near you and whatever. It's stressful. Yeah. And so my summary of all of that is, how do we cope? Two things. One, with your nutrition, just understanding it's a new situation, and we can talk more specifically about the nutrition if you want. But then secondly, lots of the kind of Stoic stuff. It's practice gratitude. If you have a bed to sleep in, start there, be grateful. If you have a roof over your head, start there, be grateful, and work up from that. With regards to, Sarah, who I mentioned earlier, she was like, we're all moaning about working remote and being on our own and this, that, and the other. It's like, we're indoors with Netflix and Wi-Fi and phones and internet and Zoom, and we can do quizzes on Zoom, and we're complaining. Like, it's really good to get some perspective again from maybe outside of your situation. Absolutely. So yeah, I'll leave it there.
The bigger picture. Well, look, you've answered that fantastically, and that I know people come to this podcast to listen about nutrition, and a lot of the time it always comes back to behavior change and mindset, because a lot of the time we can't ignore the elephant in the room, which is the pandemic, or is the room. And we can't just be like, oh, but what about macro splits? What about macros? Because actually a lot of the time it's not actually about the food. It's about all these other things that are going on as well. And you answered as well then my next question, which is assessing if it is the right time for fat loss. And a lot of the time it isn't the right time for fat loss. So how would you say it would be helpful to someone to assess their environment of whether it is a good time for fat loss?
Yeah, cool question. So it comes back to some of the stuff I've said. So
I don't want to make you repeat yourself.
No, but I'll try and talk about different stuff and maybe more of the nutrition situation. It's how do you assess if it's the right time for fat loss for you? It's the same whether it's the pandemic or not, I guess. It has to be a positive endeavor. It has to be from a place of, I did that question that I said about in terms of how has the pandemic affected your eating? And some people said it's literally polar opposites on the full spectrum. I have more time to myself at home, less commuting, so I'm cooking really nutritious meals. It's been amazing. And on the flip side, I can't stop eating. I'm, around this, that, and the other. And there are some of these individuals maybe are starting to realize that they have issues with food, and actually it's only when they're not around it that they feel like they have control. And so they maybe need to look into their relationship with food there. But when is it the right time? It's when it's going to give you life, when it's an exciting endeavor. There is no right and wrong. So understanding that, there's some considerations around, I suppose, your immune system. So we know the immune system is maybe a little bit weaker, and it's hard because the immune system is so complex. But we know that there's maybe a slight reduction in how well our immune system performs after prolonged dieting. So now these are limited to the confines of what each individual study did and how nutritionally complete it was and these different kind of things. But even through chronically being in an energy deficit, we know that can be an issue. So I had actually loads of questions right at the start when there was this big thing about, okay, one of the big factors in who's being most negatively affected by COVID is people in the overweight or obese BMI category. And So then it was this thing of, well, should I diet? Will that help me? Or should I not diet so that I'm eating lots of good food and this, that, and the other? And there's no right or wrong answer there. I think in general healthy eating, if people were in a place where they felt capable to just start eating better. Sometimes it's not a case of focusing on eating less, it's a case of focusing on eating better. And we know if people are not interested in calorie tracking or macro tracking or whatever, tracking their food, we know that the easiest way to naturally, subconsciously reduce your calories without trying, inverted commas, is to eat a more nutrient-dense, calorie-sparse food options, more natural foods, so less processed food. So we have a fair amount of good data on this in terms of if you choose processed versus ultra processed versus less processed food options. And people naturally eat less when they eat more natural foods. So it's not to say that there's good and bad foods. It's just that we do know if lots of your diet comes from these highly processed, super palatable chocolate and crisps and ice cream, you're going to eat more calories. And the more you go back to, I'm going to say sort of individual ingredient foods, and we can change this by, okay, elevated protein. If we increase our protein intake, we, without trying, our ad libitum eating, 24-hour energy intake goes down. So these are little tools that people can use that they may or may not have been using pre-pandemic. So it's whether or not it's going to add a level of stress to you or whether some focus. So actually one person said this, which is a really good example. I felt like I didn't have control in anything else in my life. So eating better was something that I could do that was positive. And I was like, yeah, what a good situation. Her reason is such a positive reason. I'm going to look after myself because it's all I can do, because my job or my work or the world, I can't control. So focusing on what you can control and these positive pursuits.
Yeah, and it can massively, not essentially fat loss itself boost self-esteem. I have to be careful with my wording, but doing something that gives you that self-efficacy of something that I can control can really boost our self-esteem. So it's really, really nicely answered. And looking at things that we can control, one thing that leaves women feeling particularly out of control is PCOS, so polycystic ovarian syndrome. And I initially spoke to you, I think it was about 3 or 4 years ago, because you were putting out information about PCOS, and it was the first time I'd heard evidence-informed education about PCOS. Before that, I was completely mugged off by the internet with PCOS after my diagnosis with it.
Yeah.
And so I messaged you and I was like, oh, please speak more about this. I'd love you to educate more around topics of this. And you were like, oh, listen to my Q&A. And you were doing the daily Q&A lives, I think, on Facebook.
Yeah, I remember. Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember. Yeah.
Yeah. So
2017, I think that was. Yeah.
yeah. So
January 2017.
goodness me, so that's about 4 years, coming up to 4 years ago. So maybe 3 or 4. So with that, I think there is a growing awareness around PCOS and how it affects people as well. And how would you recommend someone goes about learning more about PCOS if they think they may have it, or maybe if they've had a recent diagnosis with it?
Yeah, so it's tricky to say without sounding very self-serving, because the biggest PCOS Instagram account is run by a complete charlatan, and she just makes stuff up. She demonizes food. She makes super non-evidence-based recommendations. So PCOS is I suppose, an area of expertise for me. And I did my research project on it for my clinical nutrition postgraduate. And then ever since then, I've worked with clients on it and done my own research, and lots of stuff I've brought to the forefront of the industry, I suppose. I feel like, and so the thing I would say to people is, like, depending on when they listen to this podcast, hop on my Instagram, scroll down until you see I think I did 5 posts back to back, and some of them had really big text. So I think one of them is it's like a blackish box with supplements for PCOS, and all of them are around those days. And reading the captions, not just the sort of watching the videos. I always put a lot of effort into my captions in terms of trying to add to what's in the picture or quote or video that I've done above. So that's a great place to start. And then if you Google Martin McDonald PCOS or Martin McDonald inositol, you'll instantly find an article I've written on my website, which gives some good information there. And the only other place, which I need to kind of make this a bit more, because I've had loads of people messaging me, because I did this big thing for Black Friday, which you probably saw, and giving away my clinical nutrition talk on PCOS,
which I highly recommend
for like £2.
Highly recommend. It's amazing.
Thanks. And so, that's, I don't know when I delivered that, a few years ago, and it's been there, and I've been sending people there. It's like a £45 lecture, and people buying it and going, amazing, for the last few years. And then I just had this thing of like, it's such helpful information. I want to do something cool for Black Friday. I'm going to do it and then give all the proceeds to charity. And then it was like 2,500 people within, not all on Black Friday, but within that week, bought the talk. And I was like, flipping heck, like, that's super cool that many people are interested in quite a academic heavy, like, it's, if you've seen it, I don't over science unnecessarily, but it's more long form. People say, you get about 10 seconds of people's attention these days. You have to get people's attention in 3 seconds, and they're watching an hour plus lecture. It's cool that people are taking that into their own hands. So again, people having done that, and I'm probably going to find a way to post that somewhere more, a link in my bio of Instagram, and then just maybe reduce it from 40 just down to like a nominal fee, just so that more people can access it. And that's the places I would get people to start. Go and read those, because I know I've put out evidence-based information that will get you started, and then most of the other stuff, you might get 50% good and then 50% completely irrelevant information or wrong information, or it takes your focus down these weird and wacky supplements. People going, what do you think about this supplement for PCOS? And I'm like, I literally wrote a mini book on Instagram on supplements for PCOS. Do you think I wouldn't have put it in there if I thought it was a good idea for you to take it? See, that's the worst version of myself. That's me getting annoyed at someone for asking that question. But I'm just like, come on, like, it's there. Stop asking me these questions. Just read the post and implement. And then even people going, oh yeah, you said to take 3 grams of inositol, but this thing says to only take 1.5. What should I do? I'm like, oh yeah, I was wrong. Take 1.5. Like, you go and ask them. Go and ask the person telling you only to take 1.5, because I'm obviously going to go, yes, I still think I'm right. You've provided me with no other information, just, but I read this, and okay, we'll go do that then. But you're coming to me like, why are you asking me? Because I respect your opinion. Well, do what I said in my damn post. So yeah, that's the worst version of me, is getting annoyed at people like, come on.
You are allowed to, because you do help these people become empowered to autonomously look at their nutrition, and that's what you're a strong proponent of, to look at everything and make the decisions for yourself. So we'll forgive you for that, don't worry. But also I think as well, you've mentioned there about kind of how to disseminate between what is good information and what is bad information, which for people like us, it's easier to do. And what I struggle to explain to people is how to do that, how to disseminate if something is bad and if something is good, or is there good and bad together. Are you able to advise people of how to disseminate that? Because I really struggle with this one.
Yeah, I mean, this is tough. So, because for a complete layperson, how you just come across me, you've never heard of me, I've got a post on PCOS. How do you differentiate me from this woman? I can't remember, she's American or something or other.
I know who
She's
you mean,
posting
but
something.
yeah.
So, how does someone do it? Now, the problem is it takes time and effort, and people are unfortunately time poor often, whether it's a time management issue or not, whatever. And we are more lazy in this day and age. If we can't get an answer within, one quick Google, we don't want to spend the hours in whatever looking at stuff. But I feel like we do have this ability as humans. If someone paid enough attention to me and enough attention to that person, you should be able to see the difference in our motives, in the way we go about things. Now, the problem is for some people, evidence-informed, evidence-based, whatever practice is a completely new concept. Like I literally had a marketing guy say to me, "Why do you keep saying that you do evidence-based nutrition? Isn't all nutrition evidence-based?" And I was like, "Lol." I was like, amazing that you've asked that. You would think so, that people can't talk without any actual qualifications or knowledge or without any evidence behind what they're saying. But no, people can and do. And some people are just genuinely bad people that are doing stuff purely for profit. And other people are, I did have a new word for this, but I've forgotten it. Well-meaning idiots is the term I've been using for over a decade. But someone used this cool term that I've forgotten, but I just remembered. I was like, "Oh, that's a better version of my well-meaning idiots." But basically, yeah, it's someone who just doesn't realize that actually, no, their parents haven't taught them that if they haven't got any evidence for what they're saying, their opinion doesn't really actually matter. Like you can have an opinion, but you can't have your own facts, is the issue. So if you look at the motives, like this individual, what's the evidence for this? Her response, I know because people have sent me the screenshots, buy my book. Buy my program. Oh, can I just ask a quick question on this? Buy this, sign up to my whatever. Like I've spent 10 years giving out an unbelievable amount of free information, free time in private, not even, I much prefer people to comment stuff and ask questions in public on my posts because then other people can benefit. And otherwise I'm essentially providing a private service for free, but I have done for over a decade. And there's a very different scenario of like, oh, well, what's Martin stand to gain from telling me that I don't need to categorically cut out dairy and gluten as someone with PCOS? What does he stand to gain from that? Nothing. I'm just telling you what the evidence says. What does another individual gain from it? Well, they're selling a program. The problem is if I sell a PCOS program, then I become monetarily motivated. But that's why you have to, I think, in the world of nutrition at least, you do have to, because it is less regulated than maybe going to see a doctor, but you still get incompetent doctors and you still get doctors. Someone literally messaged me, her doctor has just told her to eat less than 20 grams of carbs a day because XYZ. She's my best friend. How can I tell her that she needs to not listen to her doctor? And it's like doctors do step outside their scope of practice. They're not experts in nutrition. We've got all of these, we've got cardiologists on TV in the UK as our basically forefront for how we should change our nutrition. And they're essentially carb phobic, keto zealots, essentially, if you look at their motives. But unfortunately, people get, oh, he's a doctor. Oh, he speaks really well. Oh, he can't possibly be talking crap, but yeah, he is. So it's a minefield. And what I would say is listen to 10 people, get 10 people and ask the difficult questions. What's the evidence behind what you're saying here? Compare different people. So you've got 10 people. And also, I think this is a good one, actually. If someone says that they've got unique knowledge that can be found nowhere else, that the mainstream information on this is so wrong, and I've got the key to fat loss or health or PCOS or this magic supplement or this magic protocol. What they're essentially saying is they know more than anyone else in the world. 7 billion whatever people, hundreds of thousands of scientists and academics are all wrong, but this person, and this is what often happens, don't listen to doctors and big pharma, they'll just try to give you drugs. Buy my supplement because I'm not monetarily motivated. It's like, what? It's like, buy these from my shop, buy my stupid homeopathy, whatever supplements from me. So if people really just look and don't just be gullible, if you actually care about getting the right information, go into it with a non-gullible mindset. And unfortunately, desperation causes people to be gullible. I'm desperate and nothing works for me. And bad people prey on desperation. The whole alkaline crew and all this, that, and the other, like, I'll cure your cancer, give me this tens of thousands of pounds, this, that, and the other. And it's awful. It's horrific. So they prey on that desperation because they know. And again, PCOS and fertility, people wanting to have children. It's such an emotive topic. And if you can give someone hope, people use it to lie, unfortunately. So it is difficult. And I know it's not a good answer. Because I don't think there is really a great one, but it's, I often just go, just listen to me. And it's, I could joke, it's funny. It's like, oh yeah, just listen to me and then you'll never go wrong. But unfortunately, I'm not putting out content on every single thing in the world all the time. There's only so much I can do. So, but it's like, okay, well, follow me and then follow everyone who's learned from me. Look at all the podcasts I've gone on. I don't go on podcasts with people who I think are not doing good stuff. So those people start looking at their content, start listening to this podcast, start looking at your Instagram posts, like people who, and understand that, okay, so people go, so-and-so, you're on so-and-so podcast and they said this, and that's the opposite of what you've said. And I'm said, okay, well, we won't be identical. I obviously believe I'm right. We can have a discussion there. But that's why paying attention, look how reasonable that response is. This is what I think. Are they going to have a reasonable response back? Oh, yeah, I respect Martin's opinion, but I sort of see it this way. Okay, good. And then, whereas if this person go, block, no, this is what this PCOS woman does. She just, anyone who questions her, block. Probably tells you something about maybe their motives or their ability to engage in polite discussion around whether or not actually there's any evidence behind their thing. And also one last thing I'll say is people base stuff on life experience, don't listen to them. If that's their only reference point, don't listen to them. And she's reminded me of this. Well, I've got all these client testimonials. Look at their results. Therefore, I'm right. It doesn't work like that, because I can find you someone who's done anything, veganism to carnivorism, who's got the same results and they swear by their protocol, taking this supplement, taking that supplement, this, that, and the other. It can never be the point of reference. It has to come back to something empirical, some data that we have where we've actually tested a hypothesis, and it's the brilliance of the scientific method that we don't rely on just our experiences, which can have so many variables which we can't possibly take into account.
I think it's this growing that basis of critical thinking and knowing that science does evolve. It will change, and there may well be experts in some areas and different areas and they don't agree, and that's down to you to form your own opinion on these things and just take the time. Like you said, it's a timely process, which I think going round the topic, I think you've answered that for people, in that it just takes time, which I think is a big thing. So, Martin, it's been fantastic having you on the podcast today. I've got one more question, which is something, it's a bit of a cheesy old question I used to always include at the end of the podcast, which I decided to keep in. Why not? If there is one pearl of wisdom you could offer people in stressful times to improve their mindset, what would it be? One thing.
So I feel like I'm going to repeat myself based on what we've spoken about earlier, but I think it is the single answer is just, which, yeah, you're right, cheesy, is to live a life of gratitude. I think it probably, and I'll say this because it's a bit more helpful. I think you have to practice it. The more you do it, the more you can find yourself. So one of the things in this, so Stoicism is a lot based around this, being happy with the circumstances that you're in. And the quote from the Viktor Frankl book we discussed was, the last of someone's freedoms, man's freedoms, women's freedoms, is the ability to choose your attitude to any given set of circumstances. So that is your choice. No one can take that away from you. How you choose to perceive your situation, no matter how terrible it is. And so, but you can practice that. And in Stoicism, it's this word acceptance. It's like, accept that life is crap, accept that there is death, that there is good and there's bad, and understanding that bad things will happen. So that when something bad happens, you just go, well, that is life. And that doesn't mean that we can't feel sad or have these feelings. We should obviously accept our feelings, but accepting those situations. And then you get much better at going, do you know what? This really crappy thing happened to me, but I'm so grateful that X, Y, Z. And always being able to go, see the best in a situation is definitely something that you can practice to take your mind back to quicker, or to, if in your great position, that is literally the lens through which you see it. So everything, even when it hits you. So with Stoicism, the thing that can really knock you off track is being blindsided by something you just couldn't or didn't foresee. And I've got loads of instances of this and even just death. It's like, well, I didn't see it coming. I know it happens, but I didn't see that happening. Or, relationship breakup really, really hurts people and changes them. And it's a painful experience. But going through that situation, that process of being gratitude and waking up and going, what am I grateful for this day? Because it just starts everything. It just changes the framework for how you view life. So that's my probably pearl of wisdom. And it's just, I would just recommend anyone to just go follow a load of stoic accounts on Instagram. Like, don't have things popping up on your feed that's like ketones this, or here's my 6-pack, live your best life. Like, go and read something that goes, you should live on the floor for 3 days every year and only drink bread and water. Because it's like, it's almost, I had this cool thing recently that was, wanting to be happier is actually a negative. It was Mark Manson, that's it. He's got that famous book, The Subtle Art of Not Giving Up.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it was something that he had done. He basically said, wanting to be happier is actually a negative pursuit, because you're just highlighting what you don't have.
Absolutely.
And so by highlighting what you do have, and it's the light and the dark, isn't it? After the pandemic, when you can just sit in a pub in the summer, surrounded by people, you're going to frigging love that experience.
Yeah.
And so it's hopefully this maybe is a bit inspiring for people. It's that hope, it's the niceness. It's like, I don't know when it will come. I don't know when this will be over, but one day we will be grateful for the smallest of things. And it's only because of what we are going through now.
Completely.
I'm going to end on that.
I think that's a nice thing to end on. Martin, that's super helpful for people. I'm so pleased that you did come on the podcast today. And of course, where can people find you?
Instagram is the best place. So at Martin Nutrition, but anywhere on all the social media platforms, Facebook, obviously, and then I signed up to TikTok recently, but I don't really do anything on there. If you want to learn.
I'm terrible at it. I can't. I'll
on
try.
But the other one, Yeah. The other one is my podcast, not
Mm-hmm.
another nutrition podcast. So again, I'm really enjoying that, and I feel like I'm really glad that I waited until I did when I did, because I knew it was the right time.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm almost a bit like, oh man, if I'd done this sooner. It's such a good way to just
Yeah.
get loads of information out to people. And
Agreed.
people are so into podcasts. I'm not hugely into listening to podcasts myself. But people love them. A certain subset of people absolutely flipping love them. And it's people who generally do walks or cardio, or like, I'm so bad for steps. I do like 1,000 or 2,000 a day at best. But people who go out and do their 10,000 steps and
Yeah.
they just stick a podcast on. It's brilliant. Self-improvement 101. So those are the two places, Instagram and then probably my podcast, or my website, martin-mcdonald.com. But yeah, I'm everywhere on Google if you type my name.
Good. Well, thank you so much, Martin.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me on.